Good afternoon, good morning, or from wherever you're dialing in. Welcome to Data Matters. We're here this week to talk about a very exciting and opportune conversation about data breach management. My name is Steve Wright. I am a partner here at Privacy Culture, and I am delighted to be introducing two fantastic guests. But before I do, I just want to say a big thank you to all of the people that have been listening in week by week, encouraging us to keep going, and the numbers are growing, and we're really encouraged by that, and thank you. And also all the feedback that we've got on the types of questions that you've been giving us. They have really helped us, so it helps us. So please, for this event and for others, please, if you want questions answered in advance, if there's something you're grappling with as a DPO or a CISO, we have our team here, but we also have such amazing big network of colleagues, friends and peers that we can reach out to ask. So if we don't know, we can find out for you. But each week with these weekly Data Matters, we really are trying to address the issues that we've all faced as DPOs and CISOs, the kind of things that where you want to phone a friend, where you want to be able to ask someone, and that's what we're trying to address. We're trying to make the tricky subjects easier to understand, easy to unpeel and unpack, so that we can go back to our respective offices when we're finally allowed back, and we can go and answer some of those tricky questions with practical tips. So today, as I said, we don't have our normal person introducing us, which is my business partner, Vicky Gilwa. She's actually moving today, moving house. So good luck, Vicky. That's a hell of a thing to do in such tricky times at the moment, but she's managing to do it. So it's just myself and two wonderful guests that I'd now like to introduce. Joining me today is Linda NiChualladh. She is EMEA Head of Privacy for Citi, and I've also got the charismatic Amar Singh, who is the CEO of Cyber Management Alliance. I've known both of these individuals for some time, and Amar I've probably known for longer than I care to reveal on public network. Excellent. So this week's been interesting, and there are so many things that I wanted to talk to you about, but I feel that we really should drill into this because we've only got half an hour of your time, and I want to really try to be disciplined with the time, because I do appreciate the fact that you tune in for this, and we've all got day jobs, so hopefully we'll whiz through these and get some real insights for you. So we're talking about data breach management, right? And this is a subject which, whether you're a CISO or a DPO or sitting in the privacy office, whatever your role is, most of us throughout our a career have had some sort of dealing with a data incident or data breach, and the one common theme that we see throughout this is this syndrome, which I will affectionately call the headless chicken syndrome, where everyone's running around panicking, going, what do we do? How did this ever happen? And there's a look of gloom as you go up to your boss and say, I'm really sorry, but we've had an incident, and this is why. But like with many of these subjects that we've been tackling over the last few months, the question that I'd first like to put to my guests is one of definition, because I, like you, can pick up a book or look on the internet, and then you get all these definitions, but it's very hard to sometimes unpick what they mean. So I thought I would just ask Linda first if she would mind just giving us a definition of what, certainly in her world, but in her mind, what data breach management means, or what is it? Because it does get a bit confusing. So Linda, are you happy to?
Sure. Absolutely. So I mean, I've had more than 15 years experience handling data matters. And for me, I think data breach management, the emphasis has to be on the management element there. In any crisis, in any moment where something goes awry, where you've lost control over something, whether you knew it or not, the issue is how am I going to actually respond to this? How am I going to handle this? And to your point about headless chickens, in the legal department, the place where most people never want to go, the place where people don't even see us as friends, that we do want to help, that we can actually be creative. We are not the place to come and get a no. Usually what we see is a lot of flurry, a lot of people running around wanting to do X, Y, and Z, talking about notifications, talking about writing to clients, writing to customers, managing, X, Y, and Z. And the first question I will ask is, well, what happened? And what are we dealing with? Sometimes I've seen situations where in all of the jobs that I've had in different companies where people are talking about notification to a regulator, and I'm like, I'm sorry, was there any personal data involved? And it's just silence. So I'm there to drain the energy from the event. I'm there to make things basically go as boring as possible. And I'm there to put people basically on a logical line, which is just asking the basic questions. So, defining data breach management for me is really about understanding what management means. And management means, I think, to be honest, is having a clear head, being able to step back, take that breath, and look at the totality of what's happening, rather than waiting for someone to come along and essentially do a drive-by, throw a bag of useless facts, not even facts at you, and say, please deal with it, just deal with it. We just need to do everything right this moment. So management from start to finish. And I don't mean just from when the crisis starts, I mean from before it starts.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Linda. Amar, please give us your wisdom.
No, anyway, yeah, Linda, thank you. Steve, thank you. I think if I may summarize, our job is put the head back on the chickens, right? Which is, I'm sure Linda would agree, not an easy task. I mean, we run the NCSC certified training on incident planning. And to me, data breach management is actually really straightforward in a way. It's, can you be cyber resilient, right? The World Economic Forum talks about it. And that involves everything that to expand on what Linda was saying, detection, not just protection, absolutely not just protection, but detection, how you respond, how you, once the incident is shut or closed, how you then manage your customers, your clients, the regulators, and again, going back to that panic syndrome, before you go and panic, seek the facts, as we would, if you don't have the fact, if you cannot trust your IT to give you that fact, you're going to call everything a breach. And that's the biggest mistake any organization can make today, because obligations are you have to report, but before you panic, and as I like what Linda is saying, drain the energy, right? Don't go and drink a Red Bull, for example. Rather chill out, breathe in, breathe out, and take a deep breath and seek the facts. Management is rather the easier part, but the panicking, the putting the head back on the chicken is very difficult, and it only comes with muscle memory, is what I refer to it as, in terms of testing, so that the executive and dare I say, and this is not a generalization to an extent, but often the techie element knows what to do, right? Yeah. They may not do it right, right? But they know what to do. They'll either pull the plug, worst case, right? To get it up and running. It's management, and historically they haven't been that involved because it's always been seen as an IT issue. And it's brilliant because Linda is involved, because it's a responsibility of everyone. IT is just one of those clogs in the machine. When you're managing an incident, managing a data breach, absolutely legal, counsel, PR, CEO, the crisis folks, they need to sit down and they need to look at it with the energy drained.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, I mean, thank you both. Fantastic introductions, and clearly a topical subject, because we've had questions flooding in already, and I'm gonna deal with a couple of them, and then the next question I just want you to ponder whilst I ask you these questions is sort of what's changed since GDPR. I mean, we touched on it a little bit there. In terms of the breach notification, that 72-hour critical period where we have to make decisions. But I'll be keen to get your thoughts on what's changed since the introduction of GDPR. Has that really made a difference to our industry? But there's a couple of questions, and I'm just going to pick one or two of them, because this one comes from an individual who has highlighted something which is a big problem for us, right? And that is the fact that 70% of breaches are internal. We know that, right? That's been proven the world over, and that's usually non-malicious, right? It's accidental. But the question that's come in is, if someone sent something internally from person A to person B in the same organization, yet it's sensitive personal data, and it's a bit dodgy. It's a kind of, is it a breach? Is it an incident? What is it? How do you deal with that? Just Linda, what's your thoughts on that? To that question.
I mean, if someone is, first of all, I mean, you have to understand the basis on which you got that data in the first place. You have to understand, so why do I have this data? And what were the positions and the understanding when I took this data in from the individual, who trusts me with this? So that's number one. And number two then is, then what is the person or the persons in the organization? What are their entitlements to use that data? So not everybody in every organization has the same entitlements, and nor should they. So that's an important thing. So if you're dealing with this fact pattern, rather than planning for something in the future, you have to ask, well, what kind of entitlements do they have? And if they all have the same type of entitlements, then you have to start looking at this from the point of view of, well, it doesn't appear that I have a particular privacy culture that is, segregated, that goes down in ranks, that's hierarchical. So then I have to start looking at risk. What is the risk to the individual of this data having been treated in a manner which may or may not be in line with what we were allowed to do with that? So again, you have to go back to the start and to understand, how did I get this data, and why did I get this data, and what am I allowed to do with it? So whether or not person A and person B within the same organization, one of whom discloses to the other information that may be sensitive or special category data, all depends on context. So it's all about building the story and understanding the elements that make the story. So we can't answer that question straight away, because we don't know what the entitlements were. We don't know the positions that they were in. We don't know how they shared the data. Did they, where and who was around? So it goes back again to the planning and understanding of, if you're taking in data is bits of people. It's high risk. It's high trust area. And if you can't, apply the right kind of standards from the beginning to the end with that, you shouldn't be really handling the data, because this is what comes back, So ultimately, this is the problem here is going to be one of risk and one of permission.
I think,
yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna add. I think in addition to everything what Linda is saying, organizations absolutely, if they haven't already, must take a step back and ask themselves, what is the culture? What is the organizational cultural opinion on data privacy? Because if you can't get that right, this will always be a problem, because organizations are still trying to tick the box on GDPR. Am I GDPR certified? I don't care. Well, I do care, but what I'm trying to say is, what is your CEO's culture? What's your board's culture on, hey, just get every piece of information on them, or actually just get what's absolutely necessary for the business to operate? And if the CEO cannot say something as simple as what we are saying, then the organization will never get it right.
Okay, brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant. I mean, the questions are coming in now. Thank you, audience. This is great. Is it okay to call a potential data breach a security incident so that the 72-hour notification deadline doesn't kick in?
I mean that's just playing with word, really, isn't it? I mean, so most regulators and most people will see beyond that. I mean, I think we all know in situations where, if you're asked, is that person, when you're even a teenager, so is that boy your boyfriend or is he your friend who's a boy? Like, we all kind of, it's ridiculous,
But Linda, if I may.
Your answer to that and the words that you choose will not be the issue. It'll be all the surrounding blushing and everything else that will tell you what the answer is,
No, absolutely. Linda, if I may just add to that, actually, because it's interesting, yes. I mean, I would say words are important. I think hopefully you agree, right? It's a play on words. However, this is why I think you and I both stressed earlier, seek the facts. Yeah. And start planning now, that when an analyst, example, gets an alert about a possible data breach, the analyst has also got to be able to trust the veracity of that alert. And then when he or she comes to me as the CEO or the management team, I need to be able to go, rather than wait, are you sure? Are you 100% sure? Right? And that dilly-dallying, I think, is that right word. That's where the play of words is very dangerous, because organizations don't know if the data that's being presented to them actually is implying that, oops, there is really being a data breach. So it's interesting.
They're just uncomfortable. They want desensitized words because they don't like the sound of what's, everybody, when you hear the words data breach, we all have ideas of what's going to happen and what that actually means. And I think, one of the things here is, I think you should always treat everything as if it's a data breach, but whether you call it one or not is only something that happens right at the end of all of the analysis. And I think that's it. So giving something a name straight away is problematic, which is why we have headless chicken syndrome. But treating it as that, and this repetition over again, practicing over and over on your breach and incident response thing. But there's also another reason, because if something does go wrong and there is a breach and you didn't notify early and you could be sued and the documents aren't privileged, and you're talking about data breaches all over the place, or maybe there isn't a data breach, these are things that it's just not tidy. You just need to be a little bit careful about using language in a loose way. You just have to be careful. But, calling something a security incident or calling it a data breach, I mean, I think we all know.
Yeah, right. So back to my question, okay?
Yeah.
What's changed? What's significant about the introduction of GDPR? Has this made a difference, Amar? Are we now better? Are we more protected? I mean, we certainly have to disclose that. That's evident. We've seen far more, but yeah, has it really made a difference, or is it?
Interesting. I mean, obviously, without giving anything away, on balance, what we are seeing is organizations and CEOs are calling us more to test their plans. That's, I think, a good news. And again, but sadly, on balance, I think there is still this cultural, human, and I think even Linda touched on it, that inability to accept that it's a breach, right? And that willful ignorance, they use that word, it's been used heavily before for one or two organizations in the past. The willful ignorance to go, yeah, don't tell me, that still exists. But on the good news, I think what GDPR is doing, and what just generalize the fact that we are all now digital and going to be more digital, CEOs and the boards are calling us to say, listen, forget IT, tell us and help us test our plans.
Yeah.
So I mean, on my side, just to add to that, I think one of the things that GDPR has done, because a lot of what's in GDPR was already there, it wasn't just in data protection, it would have been in other regulated sectors, finance, electronic communications, all of those types of things. So the idea of having mandatory breach notification requirements was there. But I think what's happened is we've seen so many high-profile breaches be handled in ways that we wouldn't want them handled ourselves.
Yeah.
And we've seen the mistakes. It's the luxury of being able to look on in horror at something just going wrong. And it's terrible. And what we learn from that is, you know, data, again, it's bits of people, it's an emotive topic. People have not unreasonable, but, you know, passionate responses to when their data is breached, because they don't know what's happened. They don't understand what happens in the data ecosystem. So you look at data now and your response management in terms of how it affects your brand, how it affects the company out there in the world, how people see it as a credible trading partner and a trusted advisor. So that, I think, has changed.
Thank you, Linda. So the next question, I think, is more philosophical. Do either of my guests think that this has been good for individuals? As you know, I'm a consumer just like anyone else. As you know, GDPR. If I take the fact I was DPO out of the equation and lost a lot of hair over that. No, Amar, you have not lost them. Does GDPR, you know, does that help me as an individual? Am I better off with all of this from a personal perspective?
I'll take that briefly. My benchmark, with utmost respect to my wife, but my benchmark is the day she says, I'm not going to do. I kind of close with that comment, because I think sadly, the average person, if I may, by the non-GDPR, non-legal, non-techie, non-CISO world, if they are still not that concerned, it's quite sad. They need to demand from the organizations that are collecting data and question them. And until that happens, I don't think cultures, you know, CEO cultures and organizational cultures are going to change.
Brilliant.
Yes, people are much better off because now they have powerful regulators behind them. Even if the regulators aren't doing what everybody seems to want in the press and in the blogs and huge whacking fines and things like that, there are still things that can be done. So I think people are in a much better situation. They've more information about what they can and cannot do, and we see their individual rights being used by individuals in a way that you wouldn't have seen beforehand.
Brilliant. No, that's great. Thank you so much. That's I think the question that is certainly on my mind around all of this, and you've given some really good insights here. What can we do? I think the hardest thing with anything that's new or was introduced, you know, through GDPR is sort of how to operationalize it. And in fact, some of the questions that are coming through are similar to that, about culture and breach simulation and that sort of thing. But you know, why is it so hard to operationalize, I suppose, is a question. You know, I work with different organizations, and I don't understand how come we've been doing this a long time, Amar. Come on, surely we should be really good at this now.
But Steve, no one ever thinks it's going to happen. That's the problem. Most people, except us here and people on the call and listening in, we all know it happens. We know we're probably being breached right this moment in some shape or form, because that's just the way things are, you know. And the fact is that most people don't think it's going to happen. So to the points that have been made, you know, if you can't get people to accept the fact that the bad is there, you know, it's going to be very difficult to build from the bottom up when you need the top down support, I think.
I mean, it's a very good question, and sadly we only have half an hour and time's running out. And a quick soundbite on that is, it's got to be an acceptance that the human fallacy is no one's ever going to break into our house, right? And that same fallacy carries on into the cyber world. I'll invest $1 million in a firewall, and that's the only kind of concept most humans get, and they go, that's it. The gate will be shut and nothing will happen, unless that thought process changes, and there's an acknowledgement that and the problem is, very quickly, a client, someone I know, a good friend of mine, he's a CISO, his organizational policy is 0 tolerance to cybersecurity incidents. Good luck.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, hey, good luck. I mean, he's going to get fired. He knows that. Well, he's actually told me openly that the CEO and CIO and all the execs have said zero tolerance to cybersecurity incidents. I mean, if you are at a default position like this, then you cannot operationalize GDPR because there's no scope for breach notification, right?
But wouldn't you agree that even if you stop trading right that moment in time, you're still not going to have zero risk, you know, and because you have retention and everything else. I mean, it's just a, you know, a really unhelpful approach.
Position. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you cannot operationalize breach management. You cannot operationalize breach response if your executive board has taken off, I'm not going to tolerate any security incidents. Well, hey, good luck with anything on that front.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
No. It's so topical, and I knew this week with two wonderful guests such as you was going to be hard to curtail into a particular direction, but it's okay. We're doing all right. One of the points, I suppose, more than a question, comes from one of our guests. He's saying that it's important to have a culture where colleagues can. His point is, you know, where you feel you can report these incidents, these breaches. So to your point, Amar, you know, with your if they're going to have zero tolerance, and people are going to be terrified to report, least of all your CISO friend, because he knows his job's on the line. Yep. No incidents, nothing to see here, move along. So it doesn't really bode so well for that. I mean, the burning question then, in my mind, with all of these great insights from the pair of you, is what does good look like? Because you know, we are, and maybe Amar, you can give us some tips in a minute about sort of where to look for further resources, so people, so our audience can go and research. But what does good look like? You know, how do we measure what good looks like? Because we don't really want to test it in a breach, right? We don't really want to breach to show how good we are at managing this. So
no. I'll finish it up in a few seconds, Linda, and I'll hand over to you. In my opinion, good looks like and like I said, the positive news is we are being called to advice on how to run testing exercises. The day your CEO says he wants to test your cyber incident response plans, I think that's the beginning of a good a journey to what good looks like, because that's acknowledging we've got to do a fire drill. We've got to know how to react during a fire drill, and let's do a fire drill. And I know there's a question about internal. Yes, you can run internal, but it's about trying to sell the concept to your CEO, your management, saying, yes, we want to test our plans in a safe, virtual kind of non-real environment. I mean, my quick, you can go to cm-alliance.com and obviously go back to Steve's website also. But yeah, we do a lot of this. CM as in China Mama, cm-alliance.com.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, good is all about communication, and both internally and externally, and how you handle all of it from beginning to end. And I don't, again, mean just the crisis itself. It's from the beginning about how you understand. You can do all the simulations you want, which I think simulations are fantastic. But what you see with simulations and what you see when the real thing happens, it's every, you know, it's always going to be different. It's the difference between driving a car in a game on a simulator that really mimics it, and then getting into a car and trying to drive it, and not being aware. It's great to be able to control your own internal environment, but when you have all the external actors. So communication for me is absolutely key. And one of the things I learned very, very early on was the most horrifying thing that can happen is you've got your breach plans, you've got everything going, you've got your external counsel, you've got your privilege sorted, everyone's kind of working, and then down at reception, or the person on the telephone line gets a phone call and says, "Hi, my name is Mary. I'm ringing from the BBC. I just wanted to know if you can confirm or deny whether there's been an incident." Dot. So did somebody think about how you train everybody? And this, you know, one of the points you asked us to consider was any last points. And for me, it's that you don't, if you're a CISO, if you're a DPO, if you're anybody involved in this, this is not your responsibility alone. This is everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely.
From the top down, to down all the way up to the top. It's the person on the reception, everything like that. How do you answer that question? Did anyone even think to tell or to train people how to answer that question? And so again, communication is everything.
Absolutely.
I'm so thrilled to have you both on. I'm trying to get through the questions which are going through thick and fast, and I can't see. It's great, and you know, more comments really. Top-down support is key. If leaders don't live it and demonstrate it, then it'll always be difficult to land. The culture change, and just people coming back in and agreeing with you.
It's been a pleasure.
I'm going to sum up, because I think I just want to check that I got your top tips right, because it was fantastic. But look, half an hour ago you started with the words flurry. She's like, I think that's fantastic, coming from such an experienced lawyer as yourself, and brilliant. One thing that you mentioned, Linda, you talked about legal privilege, and I'm going to take liberty and overrun in just a minute or two. What is legal privilege?
It basically, it's when an attorney and a client, or a lawyer and a client, are talking to each other about what's going on. There has to be a special place, a certain amount of room between them, that they're able to talk freely and openly about what's actually happened, without that being available to third parties. Because if there is a matter that does end up being litigated, or there's a case or anything, other parties can have access to that data if they need to prove their case, or they prove their case against you, and they can have access to those documents. But certain documents are never available, or generally there's a presumption that they're not available there. So what you do is, it's when you're talking to your lawyer, you get it's like a special safe place where we look after you.
Love it.
Yeah,
love it. That's really good, and I think that's got to be one of your top tips, because I certainly, as a DPO for John Lewis and Unilever, had a very special relationship with some privacy lawyers that I respected and trusted, that I knew I had, you know, and I think that's really important kind of thing about the preparation part, you know, and thinking about the communication. I love your point about the receptionist. I think that's a really good thing, because you can often not think about, well, hang on a minute. If I was a BBC correspondent, I would wander in, or I'd go to the nearest pub at lunchtime and try and hear the chatter about what's going on, and, you know, and eavesdrop and those sorts of things. And then, so if you've got any other top tips, I might just come back to you, Linda, in a second. So Amar, you naturally talked about fire drills, and how important that was. And also you mentioned about the sort of, you know, the difference between an incident and a breach. So what would your top tips if you were in an elevator with the CEO and they said, so Amar, what can we do? What's your top tips?
Seek the facts.
Okay.
Trust and question if you can trust the facts. Because at that point in time, that's all they need to know. What they're being told is absolutely can they trust that what they're being told, because they need facts. We recommend clients build a sheet of static facts, something that you can give a CEO on a flashcard about a certain critical asset. Is your data encrypted? Because journalists are not dumb anymore. I mean, full respect to journalists. They know they are learning these questions. We train some of them ourselves, so they're going to ask these questions. They may not understand what they mean fully, but they're going to ask these questions. Can the CEO trust the facts, the piece of paper he's been given on, and can you produce it quickly? Because at that time, speed is the biggest headache. You know, there's so many other things, communications. I mean, I think CISOs, techies should be trained in PR and comms. I've spoken on BBC many times, you know, and you need to be able to speak live, because otherwise it's daunting. Otherwise you end up doing the auntie from Talk. I'm not going to take a name, but you know who I'm talking of. Yeah. Right, you end up doing that because you have no idea what the pressure that you get under. I mean, the first time I did my live BBC, it was like, you know, it was dreadful. It was scary. And I consider myself alpha, but I was going, oh no, what's going to happen? and the journalist at the nighttime, the main time show, she put a question which was completely threw me off for a few microseconds. So I didn't manage, but going back to the communication, techies should be learned, but to the CEO, can you trust the facts? Simple.
Brilliant. That is fantastic soundbite. Thank you so much. That is great. Trust in the facts, and I like the idea of the little fact sheet. You know, what are the numbers? Is it encrypted? Is it anonymized? What's the basic facts? I really like that.
The last thing you want in a crisis is a 70-page document, which is your crisis manual. So we have a crisis. What are we going to do? Well, and then they come out with the simple.
No time. And the person who landed that plane on the Hudson River, he didn't have a time for a 70-page manual. He had Uncle Sully just had a moment to look at the checklist. That's all he did. But for the CEO, the fact sheet is absolutely critical, and he's got to be able to trust that, because otherwise his whole career is jeopardized because somebody gave him the wrong facts. I know we're running out of time. Yeah.
So I've been told by my producer to wrap this up. And so Linda, any last closing words?
Yeah, don't do this alone. Don't go on a solo run. This is a group effort, and it's not going. You don't have, as a CISO, as a DPO, as a lawyer, none of us individually have all the answers. We really don't, and the business has to be involved as well. So that would be number one. And number two, talk to each other, to your blue in the face about what this is. And that story about the receptionist, that came from a guy who was in his 80s, was head of a public relations committee, went to a massive cyber event that I was at, which had, special effects that were better than J.J. Abrams could have in, any kind of film that he was shooting. And the guy just walked up on stage with a small card. It took him ages to get there. He stood there, no PowerPoint, nothing. Everybody was waiting, everybody full of tech, and he just said, "The phone rings. What do you say?" And the fear of everything was in everybody at that point, because every tech, every lawyer in the room had no answer for it. And that's the kind of person you need on your side.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Right. Listen, I knew this could have carried on. When we were having our conversation the other day, it was evident that there's a lot to say on this. Look, all I can do is just thank the audience, thank my guests, Linda NiChualladh, EMEA Head of Privacy at Citi, Amar Singh, CEO of Cyber Management Alliance. That's Cyber Management Alliance. Little plug there for you, Amar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We've run out of time again, and next week, please tune in. We've got a very special guest, the DPO for Trainline, which is quite an interactive app, and Rebecca Turner, the DPO there, is here to talk to us all about that and the development and the risks that she has to manage on a day-to-day basis. And so she's going to bring the whole subject of risk management. So again, hopefully Vicky will be back, moved into her house by then. So we'll be back with myself, Vicky and Rebecca. But once again, a big thank you to Linda and Amar, and a big thank you for tuning in this week. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.